Thank you so much, Russell, for accepting to be here and be interviewed. When we met for the first time a couple of months ago, preparing this map project, I had visited you to discuss the maps in your book, and you had suggested this reading, wonderful reading of Eleanor. And I was just wondering if we could talk maybe a little bit about the genesis of this book, The Lion of Boaz, Jekin and Jekin Boaz, because it actually was written a few years after you moving from America to London. And originally, you intended to stay for 2 years, I think, and it's now been almost 36 years. So I was wondering what it is about the city, about London, that made you stay.
London became my workplace. It constantly gave me its energy that helped me to get my writing done. And I originally wanted to come to London because I was a big fan of ghost stories, and the very best ghost stories by M.R. James, Sheridan Le Fanu, and Algernon Blackwood and others were usually set in London. So that was my reason for wanting to be here. And once I was here, I found, as I say, what I needed to get me working.
And the purpose of your original 2-year stay actually here was, as you told me, to write a sequel to your very successful book, The Mouse and His Child, which was to be called The Return of Manny Rat. And this book did not happen. It remained an unrealized project, no?
That book got lost in mid-Atlantic. I found that after having done The Mouse and His Child and having got, 70 pages or so into The Return of Manny Rat, that I no longer wanted to write about anthropomorphic animals. I wanted to write about men and women, and I wanted to be able to use my own experience. And that is why, once I got here, and various things happened, I began The Lion of Boaz, Jekin, and Jekin Boaz.
And in this book, maps, as we could hear, play a big role. The master map, because there is talk of a master map. The master map Boaz Jekin designs for his son contains the secret of all other maps combined. It's like a map of all maps. And I was almost thinking, when I reread the book, if there is any link between that master map, that map of all maps, and the internet. Was it?
What's that about the internet?
Yeah, if there was any, because it's sort of a map which would include all maps, and somehow the internet now seems to be a map of all maps. I was wondering if it was an anticipation of that.
I don't know, could I dodge that question?
We can come back later, yeah.
and launch into something that I want to say about maps?
Yeah, of course.
In my youth, when I was more ambulatory than I am now, I used to belong to a hiking club called the Back to Nature Club. And very often, in America, they're called geodetic survey maps. Here they're ordnance maps. Using these geodetic survey maps, we would set a compass course and head cross-country to wherever we wanted to go. And there is a certain mystique about maps. There is a thrill in holding a map in your hands and looking at the brown lines getting closer and closer together that indicate a steep place. And here's a steeple marked, and there's a church. And as you go, yes, here's the steep place, and there's the church. And it's a rich experience. And I have always been a map guy. As a boy, I used to send away to the Canadian Pacific Railways for their maps, and they sent me these wonderful maps with the provinces and the states in different colors and blue for the oceans. And maps are, what can I say? Take take Robert Louis Stevenson's book Treasure Island. Every edition, whether hardback or paperback, has that map in the front. And you look at that map and you know good things are in store for you. A map is more often than not connected to action. You look at a map because you want to get somewhere to do something. Sometimes it's just you look at a map to know where you are. And when you first approached me about this, and I began to think about maps, it hit me all of a sudden that maps were the precursor of language. And I was thinking, we don't know whether prehistoric man, Cro-Magnon man, had language or not, but I was imagining a couple of Cro-Magnon guys, and one of them wants to tell the other where he saw a herd of mammoth. And first of all, he would have to establish the man he was talking to himself. So maybe he would mark something in the dirt with a stick, maybe a stick figure, maybe just some kind of a mark. And then he would have to indicate time somehow. That is, it was time behind him. It was yesterday, and he saw the herd of mammoths by a river, and there was a big rock. And so then he would scratch in the dirt the river and something that indicated the passage of time. Maybe he would, sun going up and down, and that would be the first map. And from that map began language. And now you get into a taxi and the driver has a sat nav, and astronomers have maps of the heavens. So it all began with a guy drawing with a stick in the dirt.
And what about your own maps? Do you have collection? Gilbert and George talked about the huge collection they have of maps. Do you collect maps?
I have often used maps. When I wrote Ridley Walker, I had a copy of the first ordnance map. I think it was the very first one, which was during the Victorian period. And I also had a put together composite of the Ordnance Survey maps for the area that I was working in. And I had this up on the wall, this big thing, and I also had a chart of the Thames estuary, which indicated places that I needed to refer to. And I had smaller maps that showed parts of Kent that I was working in. And the maps were always a strong support and a kind of inspiration. As I say, there's this mystique about maps that I have responded to all my life. And working on those maps, with those maps, I got Ridley Walker done, and I also drew a map of my own, which I put together with the help of, I forget the organization they were with. It might have been an agricultural college, I don't know, who showed me how in the future the Wansum Channel between one part of Kent and the other would probably be open again, so there'd be water flowing between the main body of Kent and the other part, which in my book is called The Ram.
Are there other books of yours with maps?
Well, The Mouse and His Child has a little map in it, and the Tocqueville Way has a map in the front. Oh, and I'm also thinking, apropos of Stevenson's map in Treasure Island, in Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Gold Bug, I believe there was a map too. Mm-hmm. And maps are frequently used in thrillers, where the bad guys are after the map that the good guy has. And I think we may have, as a boy, we may have sometimes played chase games in which one person had a map, and so forth.
Now I'm curious to know about your latest novel, Angelica, Lost and Found. Any connection to maps there? But if not, I'm curious to know anyhow. It would be great to hear about your new book.
Well, well, it's a funny thing. When I wrote the book, it didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. It happened to be about a hippogriff who falls in love with a flesh and blood woman. The hippogriff is an imaginary animal, and this imaginary animal falls in love with a flesh and blood woman, and they achieve intimacy, and one thing leads to another all through the book, and the imaginary animal has a voice in the narration. And as I say, when I wrote it, I said, well, it's just what I do, nothing remarkable about it. And then I tried to figure out where it was coming from. In 1997, having read Barbara Reynolds' wonderful, wonderful translation of Orlando Furioso, I wanted to do something with the characters and the ideas that were in it. And I tried to do something with the hippogriff, whom I called Volatore, and it went a few pages and then it fizzled out, and I couldn't see what to do with it. And then a couple of years ago, I took out I had a folder called Ariosto Redivivus, and I took out Ariosto Redivivus and I looked at my notes and there's nothing there. But I began to think of another way of doing it. So that's when I started writing Angelica, Lost and Found, and that impetus carried me along to the end of it. I might say that the main stimulus that got me started on it was a painting which is reproduced on the cover of the Italian edition of Orlando Furioso, and the painting is by Girolamo de Carpi, a 16th century Italian painter, and it shows Ruggiero mounted on a hippogriff rescuing Angelica from a sea monster called Orca. And this painting is interesting because it's on the cover of the book Angelica and Angelica Lost and Found. Painting is interesting because, first of all, it differs from previous paintings by de Carpi, like his Madonna and Child. This painting is almost naive in its rawness, and oddly, Angelica is squeezed into a corner, cowering behind a rock, and we can't even see her whole body. We can't see her too clearly. And over here in the sky is this hippogriff with Ruggiero sitting on it and waving his sword. And that painting stayed in my mind, and that is how I got started thinking about what to do with these characters, Ruggiero, Angelica, and the hippogriff, and that led to the novel.
I've got one more question, and that is, I hear a rumor that every year on your birthday, your many fans, also known as the Kraken Club, leave quotes from you and from your work on yellow paper. In many places they hope they'll be picked up. I read also that one member left 33 quotes in 29 locations all across London. So that's obviously connected to mapping. Can you tell us about this fan club?
Well, I don't remember how the Kraken came into being, but it did. And as you say, they have this event every year on my birthday when they select quotes from my books and they type them on yellow paper. I use yellow A4. People ask me why I use yellow A4. It's because when I was in America, I would read books. Many of the books would say that the man had a plain deal table on which was a ream of ordinary foolscap. And I thought, what is foolscap? I thought, maybe it's a kind of paper they make dunce caps out of. But when I got to London, I found that foolscap was a size, but I still thought of it as being yellow paper, and that is why I write on A4 yellow paper.
Thank you so much, Russell. Thank you very much, Eleanor. Thank you very much. Wonderful.